pressure's on.
Well, that being said, here at the top of the hour, we are going to,
Happy hour. Yes. That would be nice.
we're going to start our workshop with a carryover of the topic from last month having to do with Dutchess County Planning Federation, topic of housing.
Yeah,
Yes?
it was Development and Financing 101. So we'll pick up with the second half of this training. And again, this is all available on Dutchess County Planning Federation's website. What we talked about, or what was talked about in the beginning half, just to remind folks, is kind of went over, this is a presentation being given by Doug Olcott of CPC, Community Preservation Corporation. So they are a pretty unique lending institution in the region. We started with kind of the very basics of like the 5 C's of credit and going through that. And then we started getting into kind of determining a project's costs and expenses, and then the loan amount based on, you know, expected income. So that's kind of where we ended this, and that's on this slide. So.
And the total cost of this development is a little more than $500,000. We were able to loan $440,000, and so he had to put in $115,000. And that makes sense. That's sort of like the sweet spot for debt and equity, somewhere around 20% equity. Developers generally don't want to put in more than 30% equity and plus, but their return on their investment becomes less, and it may not make sense for them financially, because if they're getting a very low return on the cash that they have to put in, which we call the cash on cash return, they could invest these same funds in CDs, stocks, bonds, mutual funds that are less risky for a similar return. I'm a shoemaker whose children have no shoes. I've been financing affordable housing for 28 years. I only own my house. I don't own any other investment property because I want to sleep at night. I put my money in here, something safe, because I don't have that risk tolerance that developers do. So they earn their money. I guarantee that. So ask me to focus on the risks of real estate development. This is Danny giving this to the whole So what are the risks? Okay, and these are just a few examples. One is your acquisition and pre-development expense. You may spend money to buy land or do feasibility studies, traffic studies that planning boards require, plans, everything else, and then the project doesn't move forward for some reason. You can't get the variance you need. There's something that comes up on the property. You can't get the financing in place. You can't find a partner who can put in the additional money that you may need. So some projects die on the vine, and there's uncompensated costs for that. They don't get paid for that. The other is delays in project approvals. And I think people that are on planning boards and zoning boards like I am know that projects do get delayed for various reasons for approvals, and that increases the soft costs. Because again, remember the carrying costs. They got to carry the land, they got to pay taxes on it, they got to pay the insurance on it while they're, and you know, if you built a project a year ago, you could build it for about 20 or 30% less than you can right now, because it increases in construction costs because of inflation and supply chain. It was right in interest rates now during the construction. The construction loans are favorable rate loan. They over an index like the 10-year treasury. The 10-year treasury has increased in the last few months from about 1.5 to about over 4%. That means that these guys are paying more on their construction loans right now if they have projects that are in construction. And then after it's built and it's leased, you have other risks like increases in operating don't keep pace with increases in rents. So I'm told that insurance costs have increased by 20% in New York State in the last year. You know why? Because we like to sue people in New York. And when there's lawsuits and there's settlements that those companies have to pay, they're raising my foundation, all of a sudden I hit rock, or I dig up some buried fuel tank that has to be remediated, or I start to rip open some walls and I find some structural beams that I didn't. No, it's not going years. So you've got cost overrun risk, and then you've got market risk. When we're loaning on 123 Main Street, we're loaning on what we think the rents are going to be a year from now when he completes the project. If rents go down, or we over-project on the rents, we're more optimistic about the market, and it doesn't. We're projecting $1,200 a month that we were on that one, but we only get $1,100 a month. That means I would have to lower my loan amount on the back end, and the developer would have to put in more of his own cash. And then post-lease up the property, like I mentioned before, you could have unexpected vacancies, stores close, tenants move out, tenants not paying rent. So those are all the risks that developers take on, and they're real, and they lose a lot of sleep over that. So now we've talked about sort of what we call the capital stack or project. So 123 Main Street, that was a live example of a project that actually got done, and those were leased at market rents. They weren't, necessarily, not everybody in East End can afford 1,200 miles a month. This is cheap, say 1,200. So we reduced the rents from almost $1,200 a month. This is just an example. This isn't really what we did, but how would we use public subsidy to fund gaps in the equity and the conventional debt, which are created by offering properties at lower rents? And what happens is, because we're reducing the cash flow, because we're lowering the rents, that means our net operating income goes down. The net operating, so like if we reduce the rents from $1,200 a month to $800 a month, all of a sudden my gross income on rents goes down from $71,000 to $48,000. And everything else stays the same, right? I don't get lower taxes, it doesn't cost me less to pay my super or whatever. It doesn't cost me any less to do the repairs. So my net operating income goes down to $17,000 from $39,000 in the other example. So that means now, to get the same sweet spot of 1.30 debt service coverage, now I can only borrow, I can't borrow the 440 now. I can only borrow the 200,000. So now I've got a gap, right? Because the developer is not going to put in, this is the gap here, 240. If I can only loan him 200,000, there's no way this guy's going to put in $355,000. His cash on cash return is going to be nothing. He's going to say, Doug, I'm going to put that in a CD. I'm going to put it in a mutual fund. See ya. So how do we fill the gap that's created by that? And that's where subsidy funds come in. And so public subsidies are typically capital subsidies that are used to pay for project costs that are generally structured as grants for loans. And in exchange for this, developers are required to keep the rents affordable, usually for a 15 to 30-year period, subject to a regulatory agreement. And the affordability is typically defined as rents which are no more than 30% of the household's income, and that's how they determine affordable rents. So that's one tool, and then the other tool that I wanted to talk about for closing these gaps in affordable housing is tax incentive programs, sometimes known as payments in lieu of taxes or pilots. And pilots are a form of public assistance which can be used to promote affordable housing. They generally provide lower real estate taxes to the project to offset the lower rents that the developers charge. By lowering the operating costs, developers can provide more conventionally. They can afford to borrow more conventionally, to cover the development costs that they would at full real estate taxes. So this is the same example, 123 Main Street with the $800 a month's rent. His total operating expenses include full real estate taxes of $18,000 with $38,000. But let's say the municipality offered him a pilot. We say, hey, we want affordable housing for our community, for our teachers, for our firemen, for our policemen, for our municipal workers. for our service people that work in restaurants. We want affordable housing. So let's give these guys a break on their taxes. We're charging $5,000 per apartment. So we'll reduce the taxes from $18,000 to $5,000. And that's going to lower their operating expenses by $13,000. And then the NOI goes up, right? And operating income goes up to $30,000 from, I think the last example was like 17 or something like that. So now I can increase the annual debt service on this. Now I can go, remember I went from $440,000 on my loan down to $200. Now with the pilot, I'm back up to $360. And so now this project could be financially feasible. The developer could either put in another $80,000, which would probably work. You know, he'd probably be closer to like 25% equity. Or, you know, Heather can tell you, public subsidies are scarce. I can ask the municipality for a $240,000 affordable housing grant, and I may be told, look, I only have $80,000 available, make it work. So the other way to fill the gap, you could use these two together. You know, you could have a pilot which helps me lend more, and you could have subsidy funds which help fill the remaining gap, or you could just have the developer put in a little more equity. Probably either one of these would work in this scenario. So those are like the two tools, to make two main tools for affordable housing finance. And then this is just a summary of the three scenarios. So this was the first one with market rents, where his loan was $440, he had to put in $115. This is just subsidy without the pilot. He would need to find subsidy funds of $240,000 to make this work. Or this is the one with the subsidy and the pilot. He was able to get $80,000 from Ann Saylor at Dutchess County Planning and Community Development, and then the municipality gave him the pilot, which allowed us to loan more money. So that's kind of like the math. Like I said, don't get too tied up in the math, but that's what we look at. And so that's different tools that we use to figure out ways to finance housing and make it affordable. And then the next thing I wanted to talk about was, you know, just a summary of like how we look at, how we calculate, how we finance, how we maintain. We evaluate the budgets and operating performance to try to maximize the loan. We recommend public subsidy or tax abatement programs if there's a funding gap. We evaluate the developer capacity. Sometimes we recommend appropriate partners. Sometimes guys never built a project before. We say, why don't you go in with, you know, your brother-in-law who's a general contractor, and you guys can be partners, you know. Or you should go, if there's a church that wants to build something, and they have absolutely no experience, and we hook them up with another not-for-profit that is like Hudson River Housing, or somebody like that, who, Repco up in Ulster County, that has experience. And we try to recommend appropriate partners if needed. Obviously, we inspect the properties, we conduct market research, we review credit and financials, we review architectural plans and construction costs. That's a big one. We want to make sure that they can build it for what they say they can. And we have third-party reviewers that are used to looking at all kinds of projects, and they know what projects should cost, and they know if the budget is too small or too big. And then post-closing, we monitor this. We do monthly inspections as we advance funds by a third-party engineer. We don't advance funds unless work is completed in place, or in some cases, if there are required deposits for materials like elevators or windows or things like that, we can fund that. And then we put in a contingency in the loan for potential cost overruns, usually somewhere between 5 and 10% of the budget. So if something unexpected happens, we have some extra money in the loan to make sure that we can pay for that. We make sure that all permits and approvals for construction are kept on file. We hold 10% of our loan until final certificate of occupancy certificate. So we want to make sure the project gets completed. And then, as I mentioned, we also sometimes take on larger projects letters of credit or bonds, which is also typically at 10% of the construction cost. So because we want to make sure the project gets completed. So that's like during construction. And then we have to convert I said, to a 30-year permanent loan. So we have to review this after it's leased up. We want to get the rent roll of the building. We want to get copies of the leases to make sure everything's leased up. We want the final certificate of occupancy. We want to see if there's any conditions on that occupancy. Sometimes it's what's called a temporary certificate. It's like, we'll give you a temporary certificate of occupancy for 60 days until you complete the landscaping or the playground or whatever it is. We do a title search at permanent conversion, make sure that they tax, we probably make sure that none of the contractors all the contractors have been paid and there's no liens, mechanics liens on the property. And then we update the pro forma because things change. Remember, like a year ago, we were projecting rents. Now we got real rents. We were projecting what the taxes would be. Now we have the real taxes. We re-underwrite it at the time of permanent conversion to make sure it still has that 1.30 sweet spot of debt service coverage. And then that's also the time when we review the property manager. And if someone doesn't have management experiences, we may make them hire a professional manager. Because we are with that loan for the next 30 years. CPC is. And then post-conversion, there's ongoing management of the property. We've invested in this property for 30 years. We want to make sure it's not just good for the first year, we want to make sure it's good 15 years down the road. So we do annual property inspections of properties that have closed under a 30-year mortgage, and we notify the owner of any deferred maintenance or repair required. And we can put them in default if they don't comply with that. We get quarterly, or in some cases, it depends on who the permanent lender is, like who the investor is. We do Freddie Mac, we do Fannie Mae, we do different pension funds, do our permanent loans. We take operating, at least once a year we get an operating statement. We want to make sure the building is still financially healthy. And then the building reserve, remember the forced savings account that I said for the building, 10 years from now, they need a new boiler, or they need a new hot water heater. We have that nest fund that we hold on behalf of the building. They have to do the repair first, and then we refund them from the reserve. And then the operating statements of the building, we also want to know that the owner himself is still financially healthy. So he has to submit an annual financial statement of his own, his personal financial statement. So we evaluate the owner, make sure he's not going to be in trouble. And then we also escrow for insurance and real estate taxes. Because we want to make sure the building remains insured, and we want to make sure the municipality gets their taxes. Because, if he doesn't pay his real estate taxes, the town can foreclose, and real estate taxes and water sewer charge take precedence over a mortgage in the case of a foreclosure. And then obviously things happen down the road, there's floods, there's fires, things like that. We also deal with insurance claims. We are additionally insured as a mortgage lender. So if there's a fire, the insurance company notifies us, and we get bottom and also the restoration of the property for any damage caused. So that's like how we, that's like the due diligence and the oversight that goes on with multifamily housing project. And the last thing I talk about, NCO asked me to include a slide on affordable home ownership and sort of how that works. We also do affordable home buyer programs. We don't do the home buyer mortgages ourselves, but we do the construction loan to build affordable home buyer projects. Those are typically like townhouse developments in the Hudson Valley, as opposed to like single family detached homes, just because it's a more affordable way to build housing. And so I just want to give you an example of how a lender who's giving you a home buyer mortgage, we don't, like I said, we don't do these, we just do the construction loan, but how they look at how much a buyer can borrow when he's buying the house. And they look at something which is we call PITI, which is principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. So it's the principal and interest on the mortgage that the home buyer is taking out, whatever his annual real estate taxes on that house, or that home, or that condo, and what is the insurance that he has to pay for property and liability insurance. And typically lenders will only provide a mortgage up to around 33% of household income to cover PITI, principal, interest, real estate taxes, and insurance. So this is a fake example. This is not a real example. I made this up. But let's say that we have a market rate home price for $400,000. That's what the going rate is for this townhouse that I want to buy. And the Dutchess median, you look at county median income, the Dutchess median income, and remember this is household income, so if there's 2 people in a household, that would include both of the household members' income. So this is the median income in Dutchess County, it's $115,000 a year. That's the average income. Typically with affordable homeownership projects, you want to target people that are below average income, and that's usually 80% of the area median income or less. So if I take 80% of 115,000, we're targeting people that have household incomes of around $90,000. Or if it's a 2-person household, you know, they're both making around $45,000 a year, average. Okay, so if I'm going to buy this $400,000 home, and typically I want to put down 10%, I can come up with $40,000. But I got to borrow the other $360,000. And I think mortgage rates now, I mean, they go up every day, but I think we can get a single-family home mortgage for around 7% now for a 30-year. So it's going to cost me $2,400 a month or $28,000 a year just to pay my PI. Forget about T on it. So it's $28,000 for my principal, $10,000 for real estate taxes, insurance. That means my total PITI is $41,000. I can only use 33% of my income, so I have to divide that by 33%. That means the minimum income to qualify for this $360,000 mortgage is around $125,000. So I'm way over the average income for the county. And I'm certainly way over 8%. So how do I solve for that? Well, the state has, New York State, Housing Department, Division of Housing and Community Renewal has affordable home ownership state subsidy programs where you can get, they have a new program that just came out. You can get up to 150. If I'm a developer and I want to build an affordable townhouse project, I can get $150,000 in state subsidy to subsidize the cost of the home. So that goes usually as a direct purchase price subsidy to the buyer. Okay, so this $400,000 home that I couldn't afford, I'm going to get saved $150,000. So the subsidized sales price goes down to $250,000. Now my down payment, I only have to come to $25,000. I only have to mortgage $225,000. Now my monthly payment is only $1,500, which is for me. Let's change, it's your change. But now my total PITI go from $2,000 a year. If I divide that by 33%, I'm hitting my 80% median income sweet spot of $92,000 a year. And that's sort of how the affordable home ownership game works in those types of projects. And
I think we can stop there, we're pretty close, and I think we move past like the larger kind of multifamily housing projects and
Yeah.
stuff, but again, all these trainings are provided by Dutchess County Planning Federation, so they're all available online as well.
Great, thank you. We have a couple minutes. Any questions around the board? All seems pretty simple, right?
Simple, yeah.
Okay.